Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with the best hot crab dip. That's right, I'm going to show you the best recipe for what I consider the king of the hot dips. And whether you have an unlimited budget and use the really expensive fresh crab, or your funds are limited and you have to use something out of a can, this easy baked dip will still be a huge hit at your party. And to get started, we will take some room temperature cream cheese. And to that, we will add some mayonnaise, as well as some sour cream. And if you're new to hot baked dips, this is pretty much how all of them start. And then after that, I'm going to add one of my secret ingredients, which is a little touch of ketchup, which not only adds a little bit of sweet and sour savoriness, but I think it makes for a nicer color also. And then we will follow that with lemon in two forms. All right, we'll do some freshly grated zest, which gives us that beautiful intense lemon flavor. And then we'll also add the juice for a different kind of lemon flavor, but also more importantly for some acidity. And then you can't make a hot crab dip without a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. And then it is optional, but I do also like to add some minced garlic, followed by another key ingredient, a couple teaspoons of Old Bay. And please do not under any circumstances substitute with young bay. That will not work. And then we'll finish up our seasonings with some paprika, as well as some freshly ground black pepper, and of course a little touch of salt. And then if you want, and I do, I'm going to heat this up with a few splashes of hot sauce, plus to hedge our bets, a few shakes of cayenne. And then before we give this a mix, I'm going to toss in some grated white cheddar. And a sharp cheddar would work, but I do prefer the mild or medium for this. And I'm not sure why, but everybody uses the orange cheddar for this. But personally, I think it looks better with the white. And that's it. We'll take a spatula and give this a mix until we're pretty sure everything's been evenly combined. And you're probably thinking at this point, shouldn't there be crab in this? Well, yes, we're going to add that soon. But I think it's a good idea to mix everything at this point, since our crab is already going to be in pretty small pieces. And if we mix that in with everything else, it's pretty much going to disappear into the other ingredients. So by mixing that in at the end, we can hopefully retain a few identifiable pieces. And then the other ingredient we won't add until this has been mixed is our freshly sliced green onions. Since if you overwork and crush and smash cut onions, the flavor can actually get a lot more intense and harsher. So I think it's better to dump those in at this point, followed by, as promised, the best lump crab meat we can find. And by the way, someone in Maryland just said, that doesn't look like lump crab meat. Well, to them it probably doesn't, since if you're from a place that's famous for fresh crab, the lump crab meat is much lumpier and in much bigger pieces, but most of us are not going to be able to find or afford that nice fresh stuff. So we'll just use a couple containers of that refrigerated stuff they have at the supermarket, which works great and is more affordable. But if you can't swing that, don't worry. You can use canned crab meat, which you can find right next to the tuna fish. And believe it or not, even with the cheap stuff, this dip is still going to be pretty amazing. And that's it. Once our crab's been gently but evenly mixed in, we will transfer that into whatever baking dish we're going to use. And as usual with these type of baked dips, you can put it in 2 or 3 smaller baking dishes or ramekins, and you can bake those one at a time. And then once one is almost gone, you can pop another one in, thereby giving yourself a continuous supply of hot dip. But this time I just put everything in one dish. And then we are definitely not going to smooth out the top. All right, crabs are many things, but smooth is not one of them. So I like to leave the surface kind of rough and gnarly. And then what we'll do to finish this, once everything's been transferred in and maybe tidied up a little bit, is we will apply a little more grated cheddar to the top. Okay, just enough, but not too much. And then after the surface has been cheesed, to spice this up a little more and make the top look a little bit crabbier, I like to do another generous application of cayenne. And if you're not into the extra heat, just go ahead and use some paprika. And that's it. This is now ready to transfer into the center of a 450-degree oven for about 20 minutes or so, or until our dip is nice and hot and the cheese on top starts to take on a little bit of color, and it hopefully looks like this. Oh, and speaking of looks, as you can see here when I give that rack the old shaka, these dips are going to be very soupy when they first come out of the oven, which is still fine to eat, but we're making hot crab dip and not hot crab drip. So we really do want to let this sit for about 10 minutes or so before we serve. And while we wait, we can go ahead and garnish the top, which I'm going to do with, yes, even more cayenne. Because no, I didn't put enough on yet. And then I finished up with some more freshly sliced green onions. And that's it, our hot crab dip is ready to serve. And yes, I should use a towel, but I chose accurate placement over not feeling pain. And you're about to see here as I grab that adorable cheese knife and serve some of this up, that even though this was still super hot, and it had only been out of the oven for about 10 minutes, it is definitely thickened up enough to stay on the bread, so we really do want to be a little bit patient. And that, my friends, really was truly incredible. All right, even though we used a decent amount of crab, those other ingredients we included, like the Worcestershire sauce and the Old Bay, really amplify that crabby flavor. And this is going to taste like we used even more than we did. And even though it's hard to see, as I'm eating this, I am feeling and seeing pieces of crab. So mixing that stuff in at the end really does make a difference. Oh, and there is another alternative method where you can add half the crab into the dip mix, and then take the other half of the crab and kind of poke it into the top a little bit, which will make this look like it has more crab in it than it does. So if you want to try that, go ahead. I mean, you are after all in charge of the administration of your crustacean. But having said that, I absolutely loved how this came out. Oh, and by the way, if you're going to call something a dip, it has to work just as well if you dip the bread or cracker in. Otherwise, if you have to use a knife, it's a spread. And those comments I just made are dedicated to the 10 people in the world that are actually bothered by that kind of thing. You know, the people that are telling you it's not a stuffing if you didn't stuff it in the bird. That's all right, they can't help themselves. But anyway, the much more important point is whether you dip or spread, there are very few things as delicious on bread, which is definitely my first choice here. But my second choice, believe it or not, would be some nice thick potato chips. And then after that, any kind of cracker would also be very, very effective. But anyway, that's it. What I'm calling the best hot crab dip. The only real problem with this is that it's really, really hard to stop eating. So consider yourselves warned. But other than that, this dip is pretty much perfect. And I really do hope you give it a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.